Hey everybody, welcome to our second book club meeting. Hope to see you all here live. If not, welcome to the recording. Hope this is as useful for you in recording as it is live. If you're watching the recording, be sure to continue to use the comments, which is where our discussion is going to happen, and we will, be able to continue to go back and forth about the topic of the day. So today's topic is chapter 1, which is called Facing Your Dilemmas. I believe. Is that correct? Am I getting that wrong? Would I call it Facing Your Dilemmas? Maybe that's not the right title for this chapter. Let me know what you think about that. First of all, let me know that you can see me and that I am appearing here. I don't see anything showing up in comments, so hopefully this is all working. And if it's not working, then I need to know about it. Oh, here we go. Oh, I got the comments going up here. Okay, cool. Do say hello if you were here live. I'm going to just carry on though, because sometimes there's a delay on these things and we'll see how this goes. So chapter 1 is about facing your dilemmas. And the first thing I want to do though is check in on the last meeting, the previous meeting, where we talked about time tracking and top threes. And I know that is really problematic and difficult for a lot of people. And so I want to see how that's going for you and like what's happening basically, how your time tracking is going and your top threes. So go ahead and check in the comments on that. I'm going to take just a second here to make sure everything is happening as it should. Go over into the group, make sure this is going live, because I'm not seeing what I need to see. So it was funny, I ran across a blog post of somebody who's a member here. Oh, I see people are here live. Great. And I was not seeing the comments though, so now I am seeing it. Awesome. Perfect. We are all here. Awesome. 47 people live. Okay, so I was seeing somebody writing about time tracking in a blog today. And this is somebody who's a member of this group, and it just popped up in my mentions, and I checked it out. And it was really, it was a great blog post. It was very clear about the kinds of hesitations about time tracking that you might have. And I think it's really important to understand that this isn't going to be a magical fix. Like just time tracking alone is not going to necessarily do the job of fixing your relationship with how you're spending your time. The key to this is starting to be aware, but the most important thing that you can be doing is setting your top threes. So I am seeing some comments here. Let's see. It's showing up in my live producer window now. It's still not. Okay, let me do this from here. Give me just a second, you guys. I'm going to pop this open if I can so I can watch the comments more carefully. Okay. Ray says time tracking feels like a straitjacket. Well, yes, it does not. It's not fun. I didn't promise that it would be fun. I just promised that it would help. So it is a discipline that is quite difficult. And again, I do not recommend that you do this constantly for the rest of your life. You don't have to schedule down to the minute now or for the rest of your life. The most important thing is to schedule the things that are the most important. So I was talking to somebody yesterday about her list and things that weren't happening, and she was saying, she showed me her list, and there were a bunch of different items that were all things that were pending, all stuff that was she was already behind on and felt like she owed and felt a lot of guilt and weight around those things. And I told her to take everything off her board, like not look at any of those things except the one thing she had decided to do. In her case, one was enough. Maybe threes, one might be enough for you, three might be something you can handle. So I think it's really, really important that you get that focus in place for yourself. So that's the sort of the night before thing. That is the set your top three the night before so that you can avoid decision fatigue in the moment and you know the one thing, you're not focusing on other things. Part of that, though, and this gets to today's topic, is admitting to yourself that you're not actually going to do all the things and accepting that very consciously, being cognizant that you cannot do all the things and accepting the cost of that, whether that's an emotional cost, whether there's a monetary cost to it, whether that's like just the opportunity cost of, having to choose one thing over another thing. You have to accept that cost in order to do the thing that you're doing. So a lot of people here have been talking about how they are, feel like they have squirrel brain, right? They're bouncing off the walls and like they cannot focus on one thing. They keep focusing on all the things. When I was reading, for example, all your applications to this group, there were a ton of people talking about how they feel scattered all the time. They can't focus on one thing and all this other stuff. The core of why you can't keep focused is that you have not faced your dilemma. Your dilemma is, which thing am I going to put my time into? And which things am I not going to put my time into? It's so important. So when you decide your top threes, I want to give you an additional little piece to this today, which is, what are the things you are not going to do tomorrow? What are the things you agree with yourself are not going to happen tomorrow? Can it be all the rest of the things? Can you have only 3 things on the list? I find it very difficult to have only 3 things on the list, personally. I usually have more like 4 or 5 things on the list. I usually only get about 3 done, by the way, other than like little tiny admin things that are, just kind of like parts of larger projects. That is kind of my limit in terms of actually addressing anything that requires any, brain power out of me. 2 to 3 things a day. So you need to agree with yourself to not do other things. So that's going to be part of your top 3 assignment from now on, is like, here are my top 3, maybe top 1, depending on how much time you have. And here are the things that I agree will not happen tomorrow, that I am going to bear the cost of this tomorrow. Judy says, I already did the what am I not doing today list, and it's sobering but freeing. Exactly. This is you being a grown-up. Like, this is you being a true adult with your list and saying that it's super important to me to get these things done. And so I can take it. I am tough, I'm strong, and I can admit that other things are not going to happen when this thing happens. And it's tough because we want to live in that sort of, magical thinking land of like, it can all happen. If I put it on my list, somehow it's going to magically happen. And it really requires being radically honest with yourself about like, what are you actually capable of in a given day, given everything else that's already going to happen. Amy asked me to review the guardrail thing. Is it supposed to relate to my big project or my life? Thank you. Amy, it could be either one. The guardrail that I was asking you to do just right at the outset was just to kind of start thinking about like, what is something you can put in place that's like a reminder or a start to build a tiny habit that's going to support something that needs to happen in your life. So it could be something having to do with your physical health, for example, or it could be something having to do with your project. In general, you can only really focus on building one habit at a time. And so picking one is a good idea, one guardrail, activity, action to put in place, and follow that for a period of time until it feels automatic. And that period of time can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months. It really depends on how hard it is, how unnatural it is, how much you have to readjust your thinking about things. The top 3s could be your guardrail habit, that you do this every day at a certain time, and you are picking the top 3 things you're going to work on, and you're also identifying the things that you're not going to work on tomorrow. I think that can be really, really helpful. Yeah, Annette says, make a don't do list. Yes, exactly, to not do. So Allie says, I am not looking at my phone before I get out of bed in the morning. Good, I think that's awesome. Also, that doesn't have to be your action. Like, if that doesn't matter to you, if it doesn't derail you, then look at your phone, that's fine. It's like, we don't have to sort of align with what is sort of like common knowledge of what's a good idea for our behavior. All right, let's see. Julia says, my problem frequently involves not allotting time to things around the house, like cooking, which are in no way important to me, but are still a time suck. I think cooking is important to you because I think food and staying alive is important to you. And so the activity of cooking itself may not be interesting to you, but it's still an incredibly important activity because you have to prepare food for yourself and potentially for your family. And I think that's really, really crucial to acknowledge that we have to take care of our bodies and that it's a good idea to take care of our bodies. And so that includes activity, includes things like cooking, and allowing for those times in your schedule may feel like you are giving up on something, but the fact is you're doing it anyway. You have to do it anyway. And if you are allotting that time specifically to the activity that you want to be doing, instead of just kind of like, oops, I guess I'm cooking now, you feel in control. You're more like an adult. It's your job, your decision, and it's very much, you know, it changes your relationship with that task. Even if you don't love the task, it changes your relationship to decide this is what I am doing. Julia says, I hate cooking with the white hot intensity of 1,000 suns, but you're right. Maybe you'll hate it a little less if you are actually deciding to do it instead of feeling like you're sucked into it when, by accident, something like that. So Anita says, I'm not going to waste as much time watching news. That's a great sort of general vision for your life, but you need to get concrete about what that looks like. What does it mean to say, not waste as much time watching news? How much time are you spending now? How much time do you want to spend? How much time do you want to allocate to watching news? When do you want to watch news? It's not a matter of getting rid of all of it necessarily. That may not be realistic for you, but you do need to make decisions about it. So let's get back to this idea of dilemma. So dilemma is something that I've borrowed from sort of like from my literary training, like thinking about literature. So in literature, in narrative storytelling, a dilemma is where a character has two choices that compete with one another. They're mutually exclusive, or more choices, two or more, but usually two. In a story, it's better to have two. Whereas if you do one, you can't have the other one, vice versa. You have to choose one or the other. And each of those choices has both positive and negative externalities. There's a reason to choose one, and there's a reason to choose the other one. And there are also things that are negative that are going to happen from each thing. That is what you're facing when you set your top threes, and especially when you set your not threes, shall we say. You are facing the dilemma of this Euclidean space-time continuum in which we live, that there is a limit to time, there's a limit to your focus, there's a limit to your energy and your attention. You are acknowledging that that is the fact, and you're making the really hard choices, pulling up your boots and, make those choices. Now, I am not a big proponent of, grit and, like this kind of attitude of like, just, push your way through it. Like, I don't think that's the right attitude. And so when I say pull up your boots, like a red flag went off in my head as soon as I said that. That's not what I'm talking about. But I am talking about being super honest with yourself and not fooling yourself. That is something you owe to yourself. And that is what's going to be super, like at the core of everything we're doing in Growing Gills and everything we do in the Creative Focus Workshop is this basic idea of being fully honest with yourself about who you are, how you work, what's the situation of your life, and then building control and your conscious decision making into that reality that you live in. Okay, let's see. So Anne says, I made a super small guardrail and found it super hard, almost threw up. Didn't realize how busy and easy it is to have a ton of things in the air and not notice whether they're getting done or not. So Anne, tell us more about that. I think that's really interesting and probably a very common experience where you think it should be easy, but then it's not easy. I think that is probably, again, there's probably a big dilemma there that you're not really looking at. And I don't blame anybody for not looking at these things. It's not like we're trained to do this, trained to look for the dilemmas. It took me a really long time to figure out that was what was going on with me a lot, is this idea of like not seeing stuff that was right in front of me and like not understanding how I wasn't grappling with the costs and the pain of giving something up in order to do something else. And when I didn't agree to that cost and pain, I wasn't ready to take it on. And I didn't understand that it was there. It took a long time to figure that out. So that's what we're trying to do here. Christopher says, I feel so filled with promise to do something that I don't start anything. Just hard to create my own taxonomy. Well, I don't know what you mean by taxonomy, but I feel like focusing on the promise and the long-term benefit of this thing is going to stop you when you are at the beginning of something, and if you are prone to perfectionism and thinking about those end products, it's going to stop you. And so my recommendation there, what I would say is, don't think about the promise. Just figure out what the next action is. Figure out what the tiny next thing you can do is, and just do that thing, and don't think about what the end result is going to be. Refuse to think about it. Walk away from that. Kelly asks, are guardrails like boundaries? They kind of are. They're sort of like, if you put things like a reminder on your phone or like a post-it note in a place that's a guardrail, it's basically like, you're going to be coming down this road, and this is guarding you from heading off the road. So in that sense, it's like a boundary, but it's more like it's a safety feature. That's how I'm using it anyway. That's what I'm talking about, is like you're putting things into place to help you reinforce habits that you want to build. Creative habits, personal habits, whatever it is. Marjorie asks, how realistic and honest do we need to be with ourselves about how long it should take us to complete, or at least make progress on these priorities, and self-criticism about that afterward? Okay, so I just want to say that word should is a huge red flag, and anytime you're thinking this should be something, it's somebody else talking to you. It's something else coming in from outside. It's not you. It's not your own voice. Somebody's saying, like, there is a standard to which you should be adhering, and you are not adhering to it, so you're failing. And that is where that self-critical voice has a huge open door to come in and blame you for things. So my main sort of approach within the Creative Focus Workshop to how to schedule creative tasks and things like that is to schedule them, especially initially, by time, not by outcome. So I'm going to spend 25 minutes on this, not I'm going to write 500 words. And then you can complete the task and feel great about completing the task without putting as much pressure on the outcome. And this has been totally transformational for tons of my students who have, finished novels and created huge things and podcasts, whatever, because they're focusing on the process. And this is what I was saying to Christopher too. Don't focus on the outcome, focus on the process. Trust the process. If you show up and you keep doing the work will get done. When? I don't know, but sometime it'll get done. Julia says, even small things are frequently tied to the giant spider web of other things that create a huge load on your mental RAM. Yes, they are, which is why whenever you get that huge load on your mental RAM, you have a piece of paper or a note app or something like that, and you write everything down. All of the things that it brings up for you, those are open loops, and we're going to get to those. Get them down on paper. Get them out of your head. Do not try to maintain those things in your active working memory. Okay, let's see. Next action. Liz says, I hate shoulds. Me too. Really awful. Yeah, so Marjorie, you do recognize that shoulds are a huge problem, but that's why they're a huge problem. I hope you understand what I'm saying about that. It's not your fault that you would feel that. Everybody feels those all the time. We are raised with all kinds of people and cultural forces telling us that these are the standards of how we should behave and what we should be like. If you've taken those in and internalized them, you're like everybody else. There's nothing wrong with that. It's really important, though, to figure out ways to kind of do an end run around it, essentially. So, Marjorie, do I think that shoulds that feel like self-criticism actually originated with other people's criticism, so it's societal expectations? Yes, that's what I'm saying. And they may be yours now, like you have internalized these things, but sometimes it comes out of stuff that parents or teachers told you when you were a kid, or other kinds of things you've had to adhere to in various ways in your life. but it's also the sort of more amorphous kind of societal expectation of like, what does it mean to be a writer? What do writers write like? If I asked you, and I'm going to ask you right now, everybody put in the comments, what do you think writers' lives are supposed to look like? Now, I don't know, Marjorie, if you're a writer or not, but just as an example, if you are a fiction writer, what is your life supposed to look like? And I would bet we all have very similar ideas of what that life is supposed to look like, or at least there's sets of ideas about it. None of that is true, quote unquote true. It's all individual. And when we read these kinds of stories about how other people work, we are missing the point because we're not seeing the inside of it. Okay. Okay, let's see. Right. Okay. So Joanne asks about the 5 whys, which is what we're going to get to next. So I want everybody to identify so I'm getting some answers about what writers' lives are supposed to look like. And I think that that is going to be valuable. Again, like in our first meeting where we talked about like, how do you think you're broken? This is like, what do you think you should be doing, essentially? You know, I should be writing every day. I should be organized. You know, these are the kinds of things that we hear culturally. They're kind of in the ether. You've read them in blog posts. You've heard them in interviews. You know, you've read like how-to books that talk about all this stuff. Ray says you need to be tortured. Jim says writer's life is organized, consistent, publishing, prolific. And an actual writer's life is chaos, depression, frustration. Sometimes it's okay. We're trying to get to the okay part. Writing every day, many, many words, creative and motivated every day. I should want to write more than want anything else. Yeah, that is a really, really key one where like you don't always want this. Sometimes it's just, you just do it because you need to do it. And you need to keep on and trust the system and keep moving forward. Writers are supposed to have morning pages and journals. Bethany, writers should have a typewriter. I like that one. At least they should own one. At least it's like sitting on the side is like decoration. That's like what they have. You know, Paula says staying up all night writing. I'm betting some of you think get up early in the morning writing. You know that they all and any of these things, any of the things that are in this list could be true of you, but they don't need to be true in order for you to be a writer. What needs to happen is that you need to write on a regular basis in order to produce things. What does that writing look like? How long does it take? That's all up to you. That's all your option to figure that out. All right, so let's get on to the 5 whys, because the 5 whys is totally tied to this. The 5 whys is a technique for uncovering and identifying your dilemmas. So what I want now for everybody to put into the comments is what's a small thing related to your, it could be anything in your life, but ideally related to your creative life and your creative production that you say you're going to do and you consistently don't do. I know you all have things because that's why you're here, right? So and I don't mean like the huge thing like, publish stuff or something, but like some small action that should happen on you feel like should happen on like a regular basis, like a daily basis or several times a week, and it just kind of never happens. So that is the kind of thing you want to investigate with the 5 whys. Let me give it a second because there's a delay here. Okay, so Linda says sketch daily. All right, so the first thing that I would say with the 5 whys, meditation, daily drawing, good. This is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. First thing I would say about the 5 whys is it is absolutely essential that you define so the first why is like not really a why, but a what, which is like, what does this mean to you? So define, what does it mean to make an incident into a cartoon? What is the process of that? So just so you know what you're dealing with, first write down what are the steps of that. What are the steps related to post things related to my writing on Instagram? What does it look like to sketch every day? What tools are you using? What sketchbook are you working in? How much do you have to do for it to count as sketching? So get those things down first so you understand what is the content of what you're working with. A daily drawing habit. Coral, the business side of art, yes, again, very much so. You need to think about what does that look like? What are the technical, like, when you read the example in Growing Gills, it's an example from Charles Duhigg, who's talking about eating dinner with his family. And why does he not eat dinner with his family? If you don't get down to what is the action, you can't solve this problem. If you just like, it's doing stuff, like it doesn't, you can't figure out the 5 whys without getting down to what does it actually look like. So Amy, working on my big project, what is the action that you would need to do to work on your big project now? I mean, it may change over time because you're doing different actions, but like at this moment, if you were to get out your big project and work on it, what would that action look like? So get specific about those things. Catherine, this is interesting. I'm an actor, and actors right now are advocating putting yourself on tape as practice. We all have phones, and it's doable, but it requires no exterior force telling you to do acting. You're just supposed to do it and do it alone. Very tough. I think anybody who's working in performance, whose art is performance or performative in any sense, is really suffering right now. I really feel for you. And I think that creating concreteness around this project, what would it look like to act on tape? What do you need? Like when I have to video stuff, like even doing this, there's like all these different little pieces that have to go into place before I can do it. And frequently it's like 5 minutes before I have to go live. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot this thing. Oh wait, that thing. I do have a checklist. Even so, it happens. So there's a lot of complexity that goes into that. And if you start breaking down what that project looks like, that will start helping you get into action. Kelly Fisher wants to learn Adobe Illustrator, signed up for a course and falling behind. Okay. So yeah, Coral says so many things that's the problem. Yes, it is. That's why you have top 3s. So what's one thing, one of the things? Just pick one and you have to say no to the other ones. So focus on the one thing. So you guys are all, I know you're thinking about yourselves, you're thinking about your one thing, right? If you don't write it in the chat, write it for yourself on a piece of paper. Although I think it's a good idea to share it in the chat too, and get specific about what this one thing looks like. Now, the next thing you need to do from there is say, all right, so say it is, all right, Marjorie, this is a good one, invoicing. So you need to invoice, and they take me a week to actually start, and sometimes several days more before I complete and submit. So this is, invoicing is one of those things that creative people, and most people, resist like intensely. Like it's really hard to get through invoicing. Not because it's actually hard to do, but because it's a switching gears, and there's different pieces that go into this. So you need to ask yourself, why does it, like when I think I should be doing invoicing, what am I doing instead, and why am I doing that thing? So if you sit down to do invoicing, and that requires you sitting in front of your computer and using like Google Sheets or something like that, you get there, you sit down, what do you do instead of opening Google Sheets? You need to actually think, what is the thing you go to when you're sitting there like, I need to invoice, and you're not getting to even step 1 of invoicing. Or if you open the thing and then suddenly you're like, oh, now I need information from over here. And so you go there, and that's your breakdown point. Ask yourself, why is this process breaking down? Like, where is it breaking down? And then you can ask further questions about that. So let's see. So the way the 5 whys works in general is that you have to look at each particular step and think, what am I actually doing instead of what I think I should be doing, and why? That is the question you are supposed to be asking in order to get to the end result of like, how can I shift, basically put a guardrail in place so that the trickle down effect of that is making the work that I want to be doing possible, and let it happen. So to get to something like invoicing, maybe it's because you haven't actually scheduled the time for it. You haven't actually decided it's in your top 3, so those might be things that you can put in place as guardrails. Like once a week, I have, an hour in place and a checklist of all the things I need in order to invoice. So, I know which things, I have the links to the pages that need to get opened in this checklist. I can pop them all open, I can do the thing, and it's on my calendar. Like it's scheduled out and it's there. those are the kinds of guardrails you can put in place around something that needs to happen and help support that activity of actually having it happen. Do things like draft um, emails, draft canned emails to send the invoices. So you're not having to invent the email each time. You just need to copy paste the thing in there. If you use Gmail, they have a thing called templates in Gmail where you can actually create a canned email and like pop it into a blank Gmail, and you can alter it however you need to, put the person's name in or whatever, and just send it off. It's very fast. So there's lots of different ways to streamline those stuck points if you identify what the stuck points are. And each of those stuck points is a dilemma. I can either stick with this process and send this off, and it feels a little bit uncomfortable because I have to ask people for money, and that feels emotionally uncomfortable. You can ask why about that, resolve that, go down that line. Or you can say, or I can go over here and answer this email that, I haven't been answering. And that is making me feel guilty, that I haven't answered this email. There's a dilemma here, right? You're going to feel better about answering that email, but you're going to feel worse about not doing the invoice. You're going to feel better about sending the invoice out and get that, off your plate. But then you're going to have to deal with the fact that you're not doing email. It's a dilemma. If you resolve the dilemma by pre-deciding that this is my invoice time, it can help smooth that path through. All right, I need to wrap up in a minute here. Allie asks a question. What do I do if I'm not confident about the top 3 things? Do I need to practice drawing, jump right into comic making with bad drawing skills, brainstorm, etc.? Those are not top 3 kinds of things. Like practice drawing is not a top 3 thing. Draw a thing is a top 3 item. So like I need to draw this character 3 times in order to get better at it. Or I need to fill a sketch page with this character in order to, polish this thing up. The bigger question of like, how do I structure my project and lay my project out is something we'll get to later in growing Gills, and then you'll know like what is my next step. So whatever your next step is in the project should be on your top 3s, but it needs to be granular, it needs to be specific, not just practice. Julie says, I've been using the top 3 to prioritize the busy work to try to free up time to focus on the big thing. Is this appropriate? This is an ongoing question that I deal with over and over with students in the Creative Focus Workshop, where it's like, should I use schedule my time out for stuff that is administrative and make sure that happens first in order to sort of free up bandwidth for my project, or vice versa? And I think that the answer has to be very individual, but basically, you need to ask yourself very honestly, how much of this busy work has to happen, period, today, soon? Like, if it actually has to happen at all and soon, you need to get it into your calendar so that it gets done and you're not worrying about it, because worrying about it is going to prevent you from focusing. You don't necessarily have to do it right now, and you don't necessarily have to do it first. You still can carve out time for yourself to do your own creative work first, as long as you know you have enough time in your calendar allotted for the things that have to happen on the busy work list. I generally recommend not starting with the admin, but starting with the creative work, because that's when you're freshest, that's when everything's clear. I myself, though, I usually do a little email first thing in the morning. It stops by about 9 a.m. because I have a cutoff on my email, so it's like reminding me that I should not be in my email at 9 a.m. But I'll do some stuff before that, because that helps me feel like I have everything under control. I know what's going on in my life. So if you need that, that's fine. But you need to make sure that you're really choosing just the things that have to happen. When you're talking about prioritizing that over your creative work, it really has to be stuff that is essential, not just whatever. Okay, let's see. So a lot of questions here, and we're going to have to get into discussions. And I'm not going to be able to support you through all of these individual questions. I want you guys to support each other. So your assignment here is to get into the comments and help each other with these questions, because I can't be the one to answer all this stuff. And I think a lot of you have a lot of wisdom to help each other with here in terms of how do I specifically, organize this task that I want to get done, or this project? How can I boil this down to something really small and granular? How can I keep things moving forward? So I would really, really like to see that from you guys, is that you're able to spend 10 or 15 minutes commenting on other people's questions, giving them support through thinking through the problems that they're having. And for you individually with your own questions and issues, I encourage you to be as specific and granular as you can for your own thinking process, but also so other people can help you more. Sometimes things are very, if you ask a general question, it's really hard to answer. So please think about what are the pieces that go into this as much as you can. Share that with us, and then we can help you more. All right, so the chapter 1 sort of take away the assignments to do the 5 whys. And so I want everybody today, your sort of takeaways from the meeting, or like the top things from the meeting, are identify something that you were trying to get done that is consistently not getting done. It could be washing the dishes. It doesn't really matter. You can start with something small that's less emotional for you if that helps. Then you need to define specifically, what does it look like to have that thing done or done properly, or whatever. What does it mean to you to have that done? Then start asking questions about why. Why is it not happening in the way that I imagine? Start asking what's happening instead. Why do I go from this to this when I know I intend to do this, but I'm doing this thing instead? Why is that a problem? What else could I be doing? So it doesn't necessarily even have to be why questions. And go through it until you can identify some root causes. And I encourage you to look for the dilemma. Look for the choice that you're making. Look for the emotional cost. Look for the opportunity cost. And very consciously make decisions like, I'm not going to, spend this time on social media, which is, gives me the endorphins and, whatever. That is a hit. And I understand that that's painful. And it's okay that it's painful. But I'm going to choose not to do that, and I'm going to do this instead. And this is going to be painful in this way, and I accept that cost as well. And so just kind of being very open-eyed about all this stuff, I think, is really, really helpful. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up today. And next time will be Friday, same time. And we will talk about Chapter 2. And what is Chapter 2? I can't remember. I think it's idea debt, I believe. So idea debt, big thing. Everybody think about idea debt lists, and ideally read the chapter and do the activities before the meeting, and then you can jump in with eyes open and have lots of great questions. So keep commenting in this comment thread. Please post takeaways from this meeting and big eye-opening moments from this meeting in the comment thread to the meeting. That is where we can sort of gather everything here. And great to be with you today. Thank you so much for being so active in the chat. It's really, really awesome to be able to hang out with you guys. So I will see you next time. Bye.